The elevator doors opened to a hallway made of glass and quiet money. The city glittered below like a circuit board, all light and order, but the air felt colder up here, thinner, like you had to earn each breath. Amara stepped out first. Her heels made a calm, steady sound on the stone floor, the kind of sound that said she was used to rooms like this, and the eyes that waited inside them. Jordan walked beside her with the tablet under his arm, nerves hidden beneath a practiced smile. "You ready?" he asked softly. "I was ready a long time ago," she said, and the corners of her mouth lifted. Her suit was charcoal, her jewelry small, her hair pulled back so her focus had a clear line to the world. She wore power like it was oxygen, unseen but essential. A receptionist greeted them with a polite half bow and 3 layers of formality. "Good morning. Novatech welcomes you." The badge labels printed across the desk were arranged like place cards at a wedding. One read Jordan Hale, CEO, and Amara's read Amara Collins, assistant. Jordan blinked. "There's been a mix-up," he started, but Amara touched his sleeve. "Thank you," she told the receptionist, voice warm enough to bend steel without denting it. "We appreciate the welcome." The receptionist hesitated, flustered by something she couldn't name, then gestured them toward the glass doors. Inside, the boardroom stretched long and bright, a table like a runway to a view of the harbor. 6 men in tailored suits stood as a group. A 7th, older and elegant, stepped forward with a polished smile. "Mr. Hale," he said to Jordan, extending both hands. "I'm Wei. We are honored." Jordan opened his mouth again, but Amara was already there, smooth as a tide. "Thank you for having us," she said, offering her hand to Wei first. He took it, surprised by the choice, then recovered with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "Please," he said, turning to the others, "be seated. We have much to discuss." They arranged themselves around the table. The city stretched beyond them like a promise. Amara placed her leather folder on the glass, aligning it with the table's edge. She noticed the little things because the little things always showed the truth first. A lingering glance at her skin, the way a junior aide set a water glass closer to Jordan, the split-second pause before someone said her name. It didn't sting. It simply mapped the room. She had learned to read rooms before they thought to read her. Wei began with a greeting in English as smooth as old silk. He spoke of vision and synergy, of the future of supply chains and smart ports, of Novatech's strong hands guiding bold partnerships. He posed each statement to Jordan, nodding at him after every line, as if the answer he wanted could only come from one direction. Jordan glanced at Amara, unsure whether to interrupt the theater or let it play out. Amara sat with her back straight, eyes gentle, taking notes in a neat, precise hand. When Wei paused, she asked one clear question about data rights retention, and 3 heads turned toward her like ravens. "We can come to that later," someone said, smiling in a way that asked her to be patient and small. "Of course," she replied, and wrote down that answer too. Coffee arrived on a tray, cups set around with tiny silver spoons like decorations. The room buzzed with a professional warmth that left shadows at the edges. A junior interpreter took the chair near the wall, fingers poised above the keyboard. Her name tag read, Lydia Zhang. She looked at Amara once quickly with a steady kind of kindness, then down at her screen. During the break, the hum of side talk filled the room. 2 executives drifted to the window, speaking softly in Mandarin. Their words came light, almost joking, but Amara heard each one. "The servant sits very close to the boss," the taller one said. "Maybe she's here to take notes." The other laughed and replied, "Then why is the maid in the CEO's chair?" Their chuckles were quiet, confident, the private laughter of men who believed they were unseen. Amara stirred her coffee once and set the spoon down carefully. Jordan leaned in. "You don't have to take this," he murmured, anger hidden under politeness. Amara breathed once, slow and steady. "Patience wins wars," she said, and took a sip. When the meeting resumed, slides glowed on the far wall. Jordan presented the top-line numbers while Amara advanced the deck, asking the targeted questions that cleared fog from valleys. Twice an executive interrupted her mid-sentence to rephrase a point she had just made. Once a man on the far end offered a smile she had seen before. The smile that said, "You're impressive for someone like you." Another added, "Your English is very good. and Amara's pen paused for the length of a heartbeat. "Thank you," she said, even and calm. "Yours is too." We clasped his hands. "We admire Collins Global's innovation," he said, "and we hope you will trust our experience to guide this expansion." His eyes flicked to Jordan again. "We will ensure the integration is comfortable for your team," Amara answered before Jordan could. "Comfort is not our goal," she said gently. "Clarity is." She asked for specifics on data localization and the security audits promised in their last exchange. A beat passed, the smallest ripple in the room. We smiled. "We prefer to keep those items fluid until the signing." Amara nodded and wrote the word fluid, circling it once. The city outside shifted from silver to gold as the sun climbed, and with it a kind of performance ended. We closed his portfolio and rose. "We will review and respond," he said, tone careful. Chairs scraped. Handshakes followed. Someone thanked Jordan again for his leadership. Someone else told Amara it was inspiring to see more women in tech. She smiled as if the comment had not been handed to her like a souvenir. At the door, Lydia's gaze met hers for a second time. An apology lived there, and something like quiet courage. Amara dipped her head in thanks for a kindness that hadn't been spoken yet. In the corridor, Jordan exhaled. "They think I'm you," he said. "They think you're me." Amara pressed the elevator button and watched the number descend. "They think a lot of things," she said. "And they will until they see." He studied her profile, the stillness, the coiled patience in it. "Say the word and I'll correct them," he offered. The doors opened with a soft chime. "Not yet," she said, stepping in. "Let them tell me who they are first." The elevator dropped through light and reflection. Below them, the harbor brightened, ferries cutting clean lines through the water. Jordan shifted his weight, the tablet silent in his hands. "This deal could change everything," he said. Amara watched the city flicker through the glass. "Deals don't change who we are," she answered. "They reveal who everyone else is." The doors opened to the lobby, and the building swallowed their footsteps with that same expensive hush. Outside, the air felt warmer, softer on the skin. Cars slid by like thoughts. The sky was a clear blue that left no room for doubt. Jordan shaded his eyes. "What now?" he asked. Amara looked back up the length of glass, as if checking a mirror one last time. Then she turned toward the street, calm and certain. "Now," she said, "we let them underestimate me." She slipped her sunglasses on, the sun catching a small gold band at her wrist. "It's the last mistake they'll make." That evening, the city glittered across the water like a living thing. Amara sat on the balcony of her hotel suite, the lights from Victoria Harbor spilling into the room like spilled gold. The hum of traffic below faded beneath the soft sound of waves lapping the shore. It should have been peaceful. It should have felt like success. But her chest was tight. Every word from the meeting replayed in her mind like a song she couldn't turn off. The smirks, the patronizing tone, the laughter she wasn't supposed to understand. Jordan knocked gently on the sliding door. "You haven't eaten," he said, setting a takeout bag on the table. He looked tired, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. "I ordered noodles." "The spicy kind you like." "Thanks," she said quietly. She didn't move. Her gaze stayed fixed on the skyline. He hesitated, then sat across from her. "I should have said something," he blurted. "When they ignored you, when they—" Amara turned to him, her voice steady but soft. "You didn't cause it, Jordan." "I stood there," he said, his throat tightening. "They thought I was the boss, and I didn't even—" "You played the part they gave you," she interrupted. "I let them play theirs," he frowned. "You just sat there, Amara. Let them talk to me like I was—" She gave a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes silence is the sharpest blade." Jordan leaned back, frustrated. "You really think patience is going to fix this?" "No," she said, her voice hardening. "But precision will." She finally picked up the takeout container, setting it between them. Steam rose, curling in the cool air. "You know what they saw when I walked into that room?" she said almost to herself. "Not the woman who built a company from her kitchen table. Not the strategist who cut delivery costs by 40% with one algorithm. They saw a color and a gender, and they decided my worth before I spoke." Jordan looked down. "They don't know who they're dealing with." "No," Amara said, her tone calm again. "But they will." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the city. She took a slow sip of tea. Her reflection stared back at her in the window, the face of a woman who had been doubted her whole life, who had learned to survive not by shouting, but by staying still long enough to let arrogance destroy itself. After Jordan left, she sat there alone for a long time. She thought of her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts in Atlanta hospitals, who came home every night exhausted but smiling. She used to tell her, "You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far. But one day, baby, they'll wish they'd seen you sooner." Amara felt those words move through her now like fire through glass. Every insult she'd endured had built this composure, this armor of grace. But tonight, for the first time in years, she let herself feel the ache beneath it. She closed her eyes, her jaw tightening as she whispered to the empty room, "They called me a servant. Let's see how they serve humility." The next morning came with clarity instead of anger. The sky was sharp blue, the kind of day that demanded decisions. Amara sat at the small glass desk in her suite, her laptop open, fingers steady. An email had arrived from Novatech's legal department. The revised terms slashed her company's valuation by 40%, as if they believed she'd be too desperate or too intimidated to walk away. She read it twice, calm, clinical. Then she smiled, just barely. There was a knock at the door. When she opened it, Lydia Zhang stood there, the young interpreter from the meeting, clutching a folder and looking nervous. "Miss Collins," she said quickly, "I'm sorry to bother you. I needed to speak with you privately." Amara gestured her in. Lydia hesitated before sitting. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the folder on the table. "I shouldn't even be here," she said in a rush. "But I couldn't stop thinking about what happened yesterday." Amara tilted her head, patient. "Go on." "They laughed about you," Lydia said quietly, her voice shaking. "After you left, Mr. Wei and the others, they said they could break you into compliance. They called you the maid who got lucky. They said you'd accept anything just to prove you belonged." For a moment, Amara said nothing. The words hung in the air like a toxin. Then she exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to tell me that." "I know," Lydia said, eyes glistening. "But I had to. I'm tired of pretending not to hear." Amara studied her. "What's your position at Novatech?" "Interpreter. Entry level," Lydia said with a nervous laugh. "Which means I'm invisible too in a different way." Amara nodded thoughtfully. "Then you understand what it costs to be seen." "Yes," Lydia whispered. There was a pause, not empty, but full of quiet respect. Amara reached across the table, touching the folder. "Keep this between us for now. And thank you, Lydia. You didn't owe me that truth." "No one owes justice," Lydia said softly. "But someone has to start it." After Lydia left, Amara sat down again and opened her laptop. Her calm had returned, but it wasn't silence now. It was focus. She pulled up every document from the merger, every line of Novatech's due diligence report, every note she'd taken. Within hours, she found what she was looking for: inconsistencies, ethical breaches, and hidden clauses that revealed the cracks beneath their polished empire. By evening, a new report sat on her desktop, written in 2 languages, English and Mandarin. It was not a proposal. It was a mirror. Jordan knocked again, stepping in with 2 coffees. He stopped when he saw her expression, the quiet fire in her eyes. "You're doing it, aren't you?" She looked up, her tone cool and confident. "They thought my silence was ignorance." She clicked save and stood, closing the laptop. It was observation. Jordan stared at her, half in awe. "What happens now?" Amara picked up her phone, her voice low but firm. "Now, Jordan," she said, "they learn what respect costs." The following afternoon, the air in Novatech's headquarters felt different, tense, heavy, as if the building itself sensed that something was coming. Amara walked through the lobby with Jordan at her side, calm and deliberate. The same receptionist who had mistaken her for an assistant before now stood a little straighter, eyes flickering with recognition. "Welcome back, Miss Collins," she said quietly. Amara offered a polite nod, her expression unreadable. The boardroom doors opened again, and the same group of executives rose to greet them. Mr. Wei's practiced smile returned, the kind that masked arrogance behind hospitality. "Ms. Collins," he began, extending his hand, "we appreciate your return. I trust you reviewed the revised offer." "I did," Amara said smoothly, taking a seat at the head of the table. The same seat they had given Jordan days before. I found it. Lightning. The men exchanged quick glances. They were expecting resistance, maybe negotiation, but not serenity. We clasped his hands. We hope you understand that adjustments were necessary. Market realities, you see. Amara's lips curved into a faint smile. Of course. But sometimes the reality people see isn't the full picture. The projector hummed softly as she opened her laptop. On the screen appeared Novatech's own data, financial summaries, discrepancies, and small irregularities in their export contracts. I spent the past 48 hours reviewing your reports, she said, her voice steady. It seems there are inconsistencies that could concern your regulators. Wei's composure slipped for half a second. I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. I'm sure there is, Amara said, leaning forward. Just not on my part. One of the executives cleared his throat. Ms. Collins, with respect, this tone isn't necessary. We're here to build trust. Trust? She repeated quietly, her eyes locking on him. Trust doesn't start with mockery. Wei frowned, confused. I beg your pardon? Amara paused, letting silence stretch across the room until it was unbearable. Then she spoke, this time in flawless Mandarin. Her tone was calm, but her words cut like glass. Tell me, Mr. Wei, why the maid sits in the CEO's chair. The room froze. Every man at the table stiffened, eyes wide. It was the same insult they had whispered 2 days before, the one they thought she couldn't possibly have understood. No one spoke. The air thickened with disbelief. Still in Mandarin, Amara continued, her tone sharp but dignified. In my country we have a saying too. Respect is currency. Lose it and you're broke. The silence was absolute. Lydia, seated again as the interpreter, lowered her head but couldn't hide her small, proud smile. Amara switched back to English. Gentlemen, my company will not be accepting your revised offer, or any offer. Collins Global will instead be partnering with Meridian Systems of Singapore. They value integrity more than appearances. Wei's voice wavered. You're terminating a $700 million deal? Over a misunderstanding? Amara rose, sliding her report across the table. No, Mr. Wei, she said. Over disrespect. She gathered her folder, adjusted her blazer, and added with a calm finality, You mistook silence for servitude. Now you'll remember it as strength. As she walked to the door, Jordan followed, his chest tight with pride. Lydia met Amara's eyes, and in that look passed a message without words. Thank you. Outside the boardroom, the corridor felt lighter, almost cleansing. Jordan finally exhaled. I have to say, he whispered, I've seen power before, but that, Amara said softly, was peace. By the time she reached her hotel later that evening, the emails had already started. News of the canceled deal had spread through financial circles like wildfire. Some praised her boldness, others speculated, but all of them used the same name, Amara Collins, the CEO who walked away. A few days later, headlines rolled across global business networks. Novatech loses $700 million deal, amid allegations of bias. The story trended for days. Commentators called it a turning point in corporate culture. Investors in Hong Kong began asking questions. And quietly, within Novatech, internal reforms began. Mandatory ethics audits, diversity training, and the resignation of 2 senior executives. Meanwhile, Lydia received a quiet promotion. She emailed Amara just once afterward. Thank you for proving that dignity speaks every language. On the flight home, the sky was streaked with red and gold. Jordan sat beside her, half asleep. Amara stared out the window, the soft hum of the engines a steady reminder of how far she'd come. Do you ever get tired of it? Jordan asked suddenly. Of fighting these kinds of battles? Amara smiled faintly, her eyes still on the clouds. No, she said. Because every time we stand tall, the world has to sit up. The hum of the plane filled the silence that followed. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe. Not with anger, but with calm satisfaction. Somewhere beneath the clouds, change was already taking shape. When she opened her eyes again, her reflection stared back faintly in the window. They called me a servant, she whispered to herself. And they were right, just not the kind they meant. I serve truth, and it never bows. When Amara returned to Washington, D.C., the familiar hum of the city wrapped around her like a comfort she didn't realize she'd missed. The glass towers here were no less ambitious, the people no less sharp, but home had a rhythm that Hong Kong didn't, steady, grounded, and layered with a quiet kind of pride. Her assistant, Jordan, trailed behind her through the lobby of Collins Global Innovations, juggling a dozen congratulatory emails. "Everyone wants to talk," he said, half grinning. "CNN, Forbes, even that business podcast that used to ignore our requests." Amara smiled slightly, pressing the elevator button. "Let them wait a little. The story will outlast the noise." The doors closed, sealing them in a calm hush. Jordan looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall. "You know, when you spoke Mandarin in that room, I swear I felt the whole world tilt." She laughed quietly, her tone thoughtful. "You felt it tilt because truth finally took its space." Upstairs, her office smelled faintly of lavender and fresh paper. Sunlight cut through the glass, falling across framed photos on the shelves. Her mother, smiling in scrubs. Her first tiny office above a bakery. The launch day of her company. Each one told a story of resistance that had built something unshakable. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Emails poured in like rain. Congratulations from partners, questions from journalists, job applications from young women who saw her as proof that color and gender could no longer cage potential. One message caught her attention. The subject line read, "Thank you from a girl who watched." Amara opened it. The message was simple, handwritten in a photo attachment. "I saw what you did. I'm learning Mandarin now. Maybe one day I'll walk into a room like you did, and they'll see me first." Her throat tightened. She leaned back, eyes glistening with something softer than pride, something like hope. "That's it," she murmured to herself. "That's the real deal." Later that week, she agreed to a televised interview. Not for the headlines, but for the people watching who needed to see what dignity looked like when it stood its ground. The host leaned forward, curious. "Ms. Collins, when you decided to walk away from $700 million, were you angry?" Amara met the camera with a calm gaze. "Angry, maybe for a moment, but not at them. I was angry at a system that still measures respect by skin tone, at how often we teach silence instead of self-worth." The host nodded. "And you still believe change is possible?" She smiled gently. "I don't believe it, I live it. Every time someone stands up, the world shifts a little more." The clip went viral, not because she shouted but because she didn't need to. Her tone, steady and human, carried further than outrage ever could. Boardrooms began using her name as a case study in leadership ethics. Universities added her speech to their business courses. Quietly, a movement began. Not loud, not angry, but patient and precise, just like Amara. Weeks passed, and one afternoon, while reviewing her next international expansion proposal, her phone rang. The caller ID flashed Lydia Zhang. Amara answered immediately. "Ms. Collins," Lydia said, her voice bright with excitement. "I wanted you to know. They've appointed me head of compliance training at Novatech. They're rewriting company policies. They even started offering Mandarin English cultural programs." Amara's smile softened. "You see what happens when truth doesn't bow?" Lydia laughed. "I do now. Thank you for giving me the courage to speak." "You gave it to yourself," Amara said. "I just reminded you it was there." After they hung up, Amara turned her chair toward the window, watching the sunset cast the city in gold. She thought of all the boardrooms she'd sat in, the ones that tried to shrink her, silence her, dismiss her, and how in each one she had left a small crack in the walls built by prejudice. Over time, those cracks became doors for others to walk through. Jordan stepped in quietly. "You're still working?" She nodded, closing her laptop. "Always. But not for the deal, for the legacy," he grinned. "You know, people are starting to call you the woman who taught silence how to speak." Amara chuckled softly. "Then I hope they're listening." As night settled outside, she whispered the same words she'd said on that flight home. "They called me a servant." And they were right. Just not the kind they meant. I serve truth. I serve dignity. And they never bow. The lights of the city blinked in quiet agreement. And for the first time in years, Amara allowed herself to rest. Not because the fight was over, but because she knew the world would wake up tomorrow just a little fairer than before. Months later, Amara's name had become more than just a success story. It had become a symbol. Universities cited her speech and ethics lectures. Leadership workshops played her interview before every session. And headlines continued to echo the same phrase, "The woman who walked away." But Amara never sought fame. She sought fairness. Every step she took was rooted in something older than ambition. It was legacy, inherited from a mother who taught her that silence, when used with purpose, could move mountains. She returned to her routine quietly. Collins Global expanded into Singapore, just as she'd promised, and the partnership thrived. Her new partners treated her with the kind of respect that doesn't need performance, the kind that comes from shared values, not shared skin tones. Business boomed, but Amara still carried herself with the same calm she'd brought to that hostile boardroom in Hong Kong. Power hadn't changed her. It had only clarified her purpose. One morning, she walked into the company cafeteria and saw something that stopped her. A group of interns, young, bright, and diverse, were gathered around a table laughing. On one of their screens played a clip from her interview. "Every time we stand tall, the world has to sit up," she heard her own voice say. One of the interns, a young black woman with braids, looked up and froze. "Ms. Collins," she said, wide-eyed. You're kind of my hero," Amara smiled gently. "Heroes are just people who decide they've had enough of being quiet." The girl laughed shyly. "Still, you make it look easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Amara said. She glanced at the group. "But it gets easier when people like you keep going." As she walked away, she heard the interns whisper, their voices full of hope. It made her smile. Those whispers, the same kind that once carried insult, now carried inspiration. That evening, she sat by her office window as the sun began to set, the light draping over the skyline like gold silk. Jordan entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're still here," he said, handing her one. "Just thinking," she replied, eyes distant. He leaned against the desk. "About what?" "About how change starts with discomfort," she said. "When they called me the servant, they thought they were putting me in my place. They didn't know I'd already built my own." Jordan smiled. "You did more than that. You built one for the rest of us, too." She looked at him, warmth in her eyes. "Then make sure it stays open." Jordan nodded. "Always." A silence fell between them, not awkward, but full, meaningful. The kind of silence that said more than applause ever could. Weeks later, an invitation arrived, an international leadership summit in Geneva. They wanted her to deliver the keynote speech on ethical leadership and racial equality in global business. She hesitated at first. She wasn't one for grand stages. But then she thought of Lydia Zhang, of her mother, of that young intern who called her a hero. She accepted. On the day of the event, the hall was packed. Hundreds of executives, diplomats, and students from around the world filled the seats. When Amara walked onto the stage, the room went silent. She began softly, her voice steady and sure. "Power is not defined by who speaks the loudest," she said. "It's defined by who listens and what they do when they finally hear." She paused, scanning the room. "In that boardroom months ago, I was called a servant. And they were right, just not in the way they thought. Because leadership is service. It's serving justice when it's easier to stay silent. It's serving truth when it's inconvenient. It's serving the next generation so they never have to earn their worth twice." Applause erupted. Not the loud, polite kind, but the kind that swells from the chest. People stood, clapping not just for what she said, but for what she represented. Quiet defiance turned into dignity. After the event, Amara walked out into the Geneva night, cool air brushing against her face. She looked up at the stars and thought about her mother again, about how every step she took had been paved by the sacrifices of someone who refused to give up. Jordan caught up to her, grinning. "You realize you just changed the game again, right?" Amara laughed softly. "I didn't change it," she said. "I just reminded it what fairness looks like." They stood there for a moment, watching the city lights reflect off the lake. The world felt a little quieter, a little kinder. As they walked back toward the hotel, Amara spoke again, her voice calm and sure. "Respect," she said, "isn't given. It's mirrored, and when you refuse to bow, the world eventually learns how to stand beside you." It was the same lesson she'd lived her whole life, and now, finally, the world was learning it too. Over the next few years, Amara Collins became not just a CEO, but a voice that reshaped how the corporate world defined leadership. The ripple from that one meeting in Hong Kong had turned into a wave of reform across industries. Companies began examining the cultures they had long ignored. Boardrooms started including more diverse voices, and universities invited her to speak about ethical power and representation. Yet through it all, Amara stayed grounded, focused not on applause but on purpose. She often said, "Change doesn't come from outrage, it comes from endurance." Her quiet conviction had become her greatest weapon. Collins Global thrived under her guidance, expanding across continents with partnerships that reflected fairness and innovation. Her Singapore deal became a model for international collaboration, proving that integrity could coexist with success. She built mentorship programs for young women of color, helping them navigate spaces that once dismissed them. When asked why she spent so much time mentoring instead of celebrating, she would smile and say, "The best victories are the ones you share." Lydia Zhang, now a director at Novatech, often sent Amara letters updating her on the reforms she had inspired. "People still whisper," one letter read, "but now they whisper about change." Amara cherished those words more than any award she had ever received. Meanwhile, Jordan had grown into a powerful executive in his own right, learning from her example. "You taught me that leadership isn't about being heard first," he once told her. "It's about making sure others are heard at all." At a charity gala one evening, Amara was approached by a young entrepreneur from Kenya who nervously thanked her. "You showed me that power doesn't have a color," she said. "It has character." Moments like that reminded Amara why she'd endured every insult and every dismissal. Those battles had never been about her alone. They had been about the generations coming after her. Years later, when she finally decided to step back from daily operations, she addressed her team one last time. "Success," she told them, "isn't about how high you climb. It's about how wide you lift others as you rise." The room stood silent for a heartbeat before applause filled the space, a sound that carried both gratitude and promise. On her final flight home as CEO, Amara gazed out the window. The world beneath her bathed in a soft orange glow. She thought of the boardroom where it had all begun, the laughter, the doubt, the insult, and how that moment had turned into a movement. A smile touched her lips as she whispered the words that had guided her all along. "They called me a servant, and they were right, just not the kind they meant. I serve truth, I serve dignity, and they never bow." And somewhere below, in every city her story had touched, the world stood a little taller because of her.